Have you seen the pictures of the canals in Venice? The water in the canals looks, I dare say, clean. According to an NBC new report, the often murky canals recently began to get clearer, with fish visible in the water below. What brought this about? The coronavirus. Italy's efforts to limit the coronavirus has meant an absence of boat traffic on the city's famous waterways, and that did the trick. Look, the coronavirus pandemic has been fierce. It has brought about stress and anxiety and anger. It has resulted in heartache for far too many people, a consequence of lost jobs and illness, and more than 300,000 fatalities around the world. So all in all, I think Venetians would be just as happy to have their canals filled with water that looks dark and polluted if it meant that the COVID-19 had been defeated. By the way, the canals are not the only part of our environment that has benefited from the decrease in human activity. This pandemic has, at least in part, contributed in a noticeable drop in pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in a number of countries. And wouldn't you know it, this week's Torah portions of Behar and Bechutai have something to say about pandemics? No. About how we should treat the planet we inhabit? You bet, it certainly does. You may recall that after the first 6 days of creation, God rested on the seventh day. Shabbat vayinafash, says the Torah. God rested and was refreshed. And if it worked for God, then it should work for human beings too, which is why God commanded us to rest on the seventh day, Shabbat. The Torah portion of Behar opens with another commandment for resting on the seventh. But this time it's the land that needs to rest, and that is supposed to happen every 7 years. When you come into the land that I give you, says God, the land shall observe a Shabbat, a rest for me. For 6 years you may sow your fields, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard, and you may gather in its crop. But the seventh year shall be a complete rest for the land. There you have it. God wants us to give the land a break. It's not our land after all. God created all of it. It belongs to God. We are just temporary tenants. And so God teaches us again and again throughout the Torah of our responsibility to care for the earth and all of our natural resources. We human beings don't always take that advice to heart. We often treat our environment rather poorly. And sadly, it can take a pandemic to remind us of what we have squandered. Perhaps we can use this moment in which shutdowns of economic activity have caused transportation-related pollution to momentarily decrease and wildlife sightings to increase as a wake-up call. That's what our tradition would want, a reinforcement of the message that we are not here forever and that we must treat the earth with care. Wrote Gary Wachner, an environmental advocate, there's something very beautiful about nature never giving up and showing us that we're temporary in the scheme of things. I hope that once the virus is gone and we are able to safely emerge from our homes, we and the earth will both feel refreshed. Shabbat Shalom.